He wore the England badge 85 times. But today, Gary Neville stands accused of taking down our country's own flag while leaving other countries' flags flying high on his own building. At his £400 million Manchester construction site, the ex-footballer turned property developer
Gary Neville's flag fury. When football punditry meets political reality. Before we dive into this absolute car crash of a moment, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Because if Gary Neville can spectacularly misread the room this badly, imagine what else is happening in British politics that you're missing. Right? Let's get into it. Gary Neville has always had opinions. Strong ones. The kind that made him a brilliant defender for Manchester United and an even better pundit for Sky Sports. But last Friday, the former England international decided to film himself walking to work, mobile phone in hand, and delivered what can only be described as a masterclass in how to alienate your core audience in under 3 minutes. The caption promised thoughts on the horrific terrorist attack at Heaton Park Synagogue during Yom Kippur, a genuinely appalling incident that left the Jewish community reeling. What viewers got instead was something rather different, and frankly, rather baffling. Neville started sensibly enough. He called the attack horrific, expressed appropriate shock and concern, and for a moment, it seemed like a straightforward condemnation of terrorism. Standard stuff. But then, and this is where things went spectacularly off the rails, he pivoted. Hard. Suddenly, we're not talking about the attack anymore. We're talking about Union flags. Yes, you heard that right. Union flags. Apparently, on his drive to Salford City, the football club he co-owns with David Beckham, Neville noticed rather too many Union Jacks for his liking. This observation led him to a conclusion that can only be described as extraordinary. The real problem facing Britain isn't terrorism or religious hatred, but division being stoked by, and I quote, angry, middle-aged white men who know exactly what they are doing. Now, let's pause for a moment and consider the sheer audacity of this statement. Here's a multimillionaire businessman with a property portfolio worth hundreds of millions, hotels, a university, a football club, and a 7-figure Sky Sports salary, pointing his phone camera at himself whilst walking through Salford and deciding that the chaps who probably watch him every Monday night, work on his building sites, and pay the Sky subscriptions that fund his lifestyle are actually the problem. The lack of self-awareness is genuinely staggering. Gary Neville is himself, and one cannot stress this enough, a middle-aged white man. He's 50 years old. He's white. He's a man. And is certainly angry about something, given the tenor of his rant. So presumably, by his own logic, his part of the problem is diagnosing. The backlash was swift and, frankly, entirely predictable. Thousands of comments flooded in, and the tone is what's truly revealing here. These aren't simply angry trolls or political activists grinding axes. These are people who genuinely liked Gary Neville, respected him, listened to him. The kind of blokes who watched him in that legendary class of '92 side, who tuned into Monday Night Football religiously, who appreciated his tactical analysis and enjoyed his banter with Jamie Carragher. And now they are absolutely baffled. Gary, I love your views on football, but respectfully, the start of your video was great, but then it turned into tackling a totally wrong issue, wrote one viewer, Ollie Crystal, perfectly capturing confusion. What have your views on Union Jack flags or English white men got to do with targeted murders on Jews yesterday in Manchester? It's a fair question, and one Neville hasn't adequately answered. Simon Jordan, the former Crystal Palace chairman and TalkSport host, didn't mince words. He called Neville's comments appalling and accused him of living in a rarefied world, which, let's be honest, is diplomatic language for being completely out of touch. The Telegraph's Oliver Brown went further, pointing out the rather inconvenient fact that the very demographic Neville was castigating are the people who seek an escape from the daily grind by paying the Sky Sports subscriptions that support his 7-figure salary. Ouch, but accurate. There's something deeply ironic about a man who has built an entire media career on the back of working-class football fans suddenly turning around and lecturing them about their supposedly problematic patriotism. What's particularly striking about this whole debacle is that Neville isn't some naive newcomer to public discourse. He's been doing this for years. He's never stuck to football. The podcast he co-hosts is literally called Stick to Football, which tells you everything you need to know about how seriously he takes that advice. He's weighed in on housing, workers' rights, government policy, you name it. And often, his interventions have been well received, even when controversial. But this was different. This wasn't punching up at politicians or wealthy club owners. This was punching down, or at least sideways, at ordinary people who fly a flag and happen to fit a certain demographic profile. In the wake of a terrorist attack on a synagogue, no less, the comment section beneath his video reads like a slow-motion breakup between Neville and his fan base. Gary, this is absolutely disgraceful, wrote Stuart Clark. As a middle-aged white man, I'm sick to death of being blamed for every evil in society while the real issues are ignored. Another commenter, who identified himself as a Manchester United fan, wrote something rather poignant. You played football for the flag in our country. As a younger man, I was prepared to die for both and come back home with my coffin wrapped in a Union flag. This government and you appear to be tone deaf to what raising the colors is all about, and it isn't about division. There's genuine hurt in these responses, not just anger. These are people who feel betrayed by someone they admired, someone who they thought understood them, and perhaps that's a real story here. Gary Neville has spent years cultivating an image as the everyman from Bury, the working-class lad made good who never forgot where he came from. But this video pulled back the curtain on something uncomfortable. Neville isn't that everyman anymore, if he ever truly was. He's a member of the metropolitan elite now, whether he likes it or not. He hobnobs with politicians, owns vast swathes of Manchester, and has business interests that dwarf the annual earnings of most of his viewers 1,000 times over. When you live in that world long enough, your perspective shifts. You start seeing Union flags as symbols of division rather than what they actually are for most people, simple expressions of pride in one's country. You start viewing football fans through the lens of academic discourse about identity politics rather than as a flesh-and-blood people who made your career possible. It's worth noting that Neville's former teammate Jaap Stam once described both Gary and his brother Phil as, shall we say, persistently vocal individuals who never stop complaining. Whinging in a dressing room or during Sky Sport analysis is one thing. It's even part of the charm, part of what makes Neville an effective pundit. But wading into the cultural and political minefield of national identity in the immediate aftermath of a terrorist attack, that requires a rather different set of skills, a level of nuance and sensitivity that this video simply didn't demonstrate. And the timing couldn't have been worse. Gary Lineker, another former England player who never met a political issue he didn't want to comment on, recently departed the BBC after years of disputes over his public interventions. One might have thought that would serve as something of a cautionary tale for footballers turned pundits with political aspirations. The question now is whether this represents a genuine turning point for Neville or merely a temporary misstep. Gary, stick to football, wrote Dan Taylor in the comments, echoing what thousands of others were surely thinking. And you know what? Maybe that's not such bad advice. Because for all his business acumen and media savvy, Neville's strength has always been his ability to break down what happened on the pitch, to explain tactical decisions, to provide insight into the footballer's mindset. When he sticks to what he knows, he's brilliant. When he ventures into sweeping pronouncements about the state of the nation and who's to blame for its problems, he's just another wealthy bloke with opinions, no more qualified than anyone else, and considerably more disconnected from ordinary life than most. The really damaging thing about this whole episode is that it's undermined Neville's credibility not just on political matters, but potentially on everything else. Because if he can be this wrong about something so obvious, if he can genuinely believe that the primary response to a terrorist attack should be hand-wringing about patriotic symbols, then what else is he getting wrong? It's the kind of unforced error that makes people question everything that came before. And in the merciless world of social media and public opinion, that's incredibly difficult to recover from. Trust, once lost, is bloody hard to rebuild. So where does Gary Neville go from here? Does he double down, convinced that he's speaking truth to power and that the criticism is merely proof that he's touched a nerve? Or does he step back, reflect, and perhaps recognize that conflating Union flags with terrorism in a 3-minute phone video wasn't his finest hour? Only time will tell. But one thing's certain, the comment section isn't going away, and neither is a memory of the spectacular misjudgment. If you've made it this far, you clearly understand that British politics and culture are serving up drama that even the Premier League can't match. Subscribe to British Connors because these moments of spectacular self-destruction don't announce themselves in advance, and you'll want to be here when the next one drops. See you in the next video. Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.